I love Star Wars, but it's getting honestly pretty exhausting to even talk about Star Wars. I mean, everybody seems to have an opinion. The commentary on Star Wars seems to be everywhere. There's a large portion of the fan base super pissed off at Disney right now, and they are letting everyone know about it. With all this focus, with all this commentary, with all of this just blah, 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 I've been sitting here trying to figure it out. Like, I've been thinking about it. What exactly is going on? Why is this happening to Star Wars? Is Star Wars really this big of a deal? Does it matter that much? Are these just movies and everyone sort of needs to get past it and just put things in perspective? I mean, honestly, I think these are fair questions. And so I after racking my brain and after really struggling this week with making Star Wars content, I had to do a video. And in this video, I'm going to explain why Star Wars really f***ing matters. What's up, YouTube? It's Josh. This is the Den of Nerds. If you love Star Wars like I do, subscribe to this channel because I'm going to keep doing Star Wars content no matter how much of my longevity it costs me. Seriously, at this point, my blood pressure is probably through the roof. Quickly, before we get into this video, I need to shout out F Nicole 1013, who got the nerd card question correct in one of my recent solo videos. You definitely know your stuff when it comes to Star Wars, so shout out to you, F Nicole. We'll do another nerd card question at the end of this video. All right, here we go. I had to do this video, guys. Look, if you've been watching, if you're a hardcore subscriber, if you've been following what's going on, I think you could probably tell all of this is sort of wearing on me a little bit. I mean, I don't know even how to address the fandom. I don't even know how to do this kind of, and so I had to do this video. This is sort of getting a lot of stuff off of my chest. So let's talk about this crazy thing known as Star Wars. Why is this so important? Why does this matter to some people? Well, let's go back in time to when Star Wars was just rolling around in the head of some young dude named George Lucas. By the way, people say that I look a lot like George Lucas. My last name is Lucas, and they ask me if I'm related to him. The answer is no. I'm actually his clone. And so this kid with this crazy imagination sort of formulated this amalgam of all kinds of awesome, nerdy, and mythological things. The dude was into comic books. The dude was into social issues. The dude was into avant-garde art. And he was into philosophy and the teachings of Joseph Campbell. You combine that with a love of serialized Saturday morning television shows, and you get this weird thing known as Star Wars. George has famously said that the film was designed for young people. I mean, he always wanted to make a movie for young people and leave them with some lessons for adulthood. Now, you gotta also understand what was going on in the country at the time. This was just after the Vietnam War and Watergate, and honestly, the country was in this really weird place where we were second guessing our heroes, and there was no real monomyth out there. There was nothing that really united us, and there was a lot of questions about who you could trust, what you could believe in society. This is reflected in the art of the time. If you look at what happened in the 70s before Star Wars, there's a lot of anti-heroes, there's a lot of grittiness. It was almost like the expression of how the American public was feeling about people, and morality was being put into these movies. Then, in almost like a response to this young filmmaker decides to write and create a science fiction fantasy in which heroism and the monomyth and just deep mythological roots are super prevalent. It was a breath of fresh air. You had the bad guys wearing black. You had the good guys wearing white. It just made sense. It was morality people could trust. And on top of that, it was visually stunning. I personally believe, and George has said this in many interviews, that he attributes a lot of the success of Star Wars to the mythological paradigm or structure that it was built upon. There's just something about these stories, and if you get into Joseph Campbell's stuff, he talks a lot about how societies and civilizations that never had communication with each other have the same numbers and basic stories pop up. And the argument here is that really there's something innately human about these stories, and they are a reflection of what is true on the inside of all of us. So that's why all of these people were able to have these stories that were eerily similar. And so that's part of the magic of Star Wars. That's what makes it so massively appealing, and that's what really just puts it into the deep core of the audience. So at a time when things were going crazy, when we didn't have a myth to unite us, when the world was heading in a very secular way, Star Wars comes in and reintroduces myth in a way that was massively impactful. And the people that it affected are just numerous. I mean, like James Cameron wouldn't have made movies if it wasn't for Star Wars. And do yourself a favor, just go online and Google the people that were affected by Star Wars. You've got scientists, you've got engineers, you've got people in the military, you've got people that tried to push for world peace, you've got storytellers, you've got people in technology, massive, massive groups of people. And literally the world was impacted by this mythological movie that, like I said, this strange dude made. Now, I think the next chapter in Star Wars life cycle is a very interesting one. Now, not only did these films have a lot of space between them, but after Return of the Jedi, there's a 16-year gap before you get the prequels. Now, what that created was a generation to generation passing of these stories. That's where I come in. I wasn't around when the original trilogy was first being introduced. It got passed to me by my father, by my aunts and uncles, and their reverence for it and the way that they interacted with that material made a major impact on me. And there's something really cool about that, right? It's like a perennial thing. It really feels like standing around the fire and having dad tell you the story that grandfather told him, that your great-grandfather told him. It's just so meta, and it makes so much sense contextually to what Star Wars is. And so you have this myth continue to be passed down, and there was no new stories, so we had to make up our new stories. You had the expanded universe, a ton of people that just had their creativity blossom within that world, giving us some amazing stories. You have kids playing out the stories they see in the films, out in the playgrounds, out with each other in the backyard, just watching these movies over and over again. The way that Star Wars was experienced before the prequels really fell right in a line with the mythological roots that it has. Now then you get to the prequels and people were pissed. I mean, like, I was young enough to remember it, and actually during that time I was so young that I actually really liked the prequels, and I didn't understand some of the hate that was out there for them. Now, in my experience, a lot of people that had children and were able to sort of vicariously enjoy the prequels through their children's experience, they tended to like the prequels a lot. But the people that didn't have kids and went in thinking they were going to get their old Star Wars, they were super pissed. Now, I'm not here to argue about the quality of the prequels. That stuff's well documented. I actually do still enjoy them, maybe because I was young when they came out. But that's not the point. The point is that when that happened, you had this whole fan base almost turn on George Lucas. The reaction that people had to the changing of Star Wars is what is important here. It sort of hammers home this point of why it's so important and why it matters to people so much. Some of the mythic feeling was sort of taken away. I mean, when you introduce the midichlorians, which is sort of a scientific explanation for something else that was supposed to be mythic, you start to tarnish that feeling, that goodness that comes with it. And the feeling of Star Wars is something that people bring up all the time. It's got to feel like Star Wars. By the way, Kathy Kennedy actually said this at Celebration. The most important thing for her is that a film feels like Star Wars. So she's at least aware of this as a concept. Now, a lot of people commented and they like come at me and they're like, what do you mean feeling of Star Wars? What feels like Star Wars? What does that even mean, Josh? It doesn't even make sense when you say that. And I will tell you that I believe the feeling of Star Wars is mythic. It has mystery to it. It has shrouds of darkness, things that you can't quite understand. It makes you go inside. But that's sort of the surfacey, like floaty kind of explanation. I think there's literal ways to give the Star Wars feeling, including the performances that the actors give, the way that the dialogue is written and delivered, the cinematography, the fact that the world is lived in, the music. I mean, John Williams, that score, the way that music impacts the film. All of this stuff adds up. You've heard me probably say mise en scène several times in videos here on the channel. I'm an old film student. This was something my professors would constantly talk about. It's a French French phrase. It basically just means the feeling of the scene. And mise en scène is created by lighting, atmosphere, mood, editing, all of these different things. Film is a really unique medium in that way. When you read a comic book, it's super subjective. I might read way fast through these panels and not get the same vibe as you. You might spend couple of minutes in each panel and really dig in and get that kind of imagery, and you have a totally different experience. When you're watching film, it's really not like that. The timing, the sound, all of this stuff, it more or less gives a very similar experience to everyone that is viewing it. So within that context, you really need to nail the Star Wars feeling, and I think that feeling, the fact that it almost can't be articulated, is part of the reason why it's so important. So in a sense, it's not really the quality of the film that matters. It's more like the resonance that the films have. That first feeling that we had with Star Wars, that association that we as Star Wars fans have with the stories that are told to us, I think that's where the magic happens. That is what people are upset about. This rejection of that feeling, which, you know, there's all sorts of things that you could get into that Disney Star Wars is doing that might be retracting from that. But I'm not going to get into that. I'm going to talk about why I think they need to double down and focus on that mythic feeling. So what's so interesting here is the thing that originally gave Star Wars its power, the reason it is such a pop culture phenomenon, is the exact same reason why it's always under the microscope. It's the exact same reason that it gets so much criticism, and it's the exact same reason that there are so many passionate fans out there for it. It's really a catch-22, but it's like that is what the qualities of it are. That's why it's so important. I mean, in a lot of ways, there's so much that separates us in society, right? But story is so powerful. For so long, story has been innately important to the psychology of a human being and to the psychology of a group or a tribe. The story we tell about ourselves, the story we tell about our allies, and the story we tell about our enemies, both external and internal, are so important to culture. And I think Star Wars is one of those stories. It's important to culture. So I hope some of that made sense. I hope it wasn't too ranty or rambly. I just needed to get this off my chest and explain it. And this is what I truly believe. This is why Star Wars really matters. Let me know what you think about it. I mean, do you agree with some of these points? Is there something else that you think is the reason why Star Wars is so important? Whatever you are thinking, let me know in the comment section below. All right, let's check that nerd card really quickly. I want to know what Hollywood studio funded the original Star Wars. This is A New Hope. At the time, it was just called Star Wars. What studio funded that film? Answer that question in the comment section below. You can click below to watch more dope videos. You can click our icon to subscribe to get all of our future videos. As I always say, I hope you are having an awesome and nerdy day, and I will see you in the next video.